Great to be back here. This is our last panel, and as you see in the agenda, we're going to conclude with a conversation between me and Grace, just reflecting back on 5 years of her great book, Uprooted. I hope you've noticed there's a bit of a method to the madness here on how we've outlined these 3 panels. We wanted to begin with the theoretical and move through the research and social science, and then conclude with where this is all finding its way through to actual public policy and public leadership. And so in that, I'm delighted to have 3 people who are leading at the local level, not just on this particular issue, but certainly this is one that they've taken on in some important ways. You see the panelists there. Mary Carl is the CEO of Miracle Messages, which we'll learn much more about that terrific nonprofit organization that works in San Francisco and the Bay Area. Dan Efsaf is the district manager for the City of Paradise, their recreation and park district. And Philip Falcone is a city council member for the City of Riverside. Please join me in welcoming this last panel. So I wanted to begin with some just targeted questions before we open it up to some broader-based discussion. And Mary, I want to begin with you and your work at Miracle Messages. I think one of the things that I was really fascinated in learning about your work with the unhoused and homeless was that your organization actually sees this issue through the lens of social disconnection. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Miracle Messages, a little bit of background on how it got started, but to talk specifically then about your methodology in responding to, at one sense, is obviously in the theme of this conference is a discussion around loneliness, but also intersects with another massive California policy issue in homelessness.
So Miracle Messages has been around for about 10 years, and our organization started with our founder, Kevin F. Adler, talking to people who were living on the streets of San Francisco, and really understanding from them why, what their experience was living on the streets and what do they need. And one of the really profound things that actually shaped the creation of Miracle Messages was somebody identifying that they didn't realize that they were homeless when they lost their housing, but when they lost their friends and family. And that really created the pathway for our organization to be established. And we really believe that housing and homelessness is not a crisis of just the housing instability, but it's a social connection crisis. We run 3 programs through our organization. One is reunification. We talked a little bit about that earlier today around the disconnect between individuals who are experiencing homelessness and their family. We support them in finding them and connecting them with each other. We also support people in establishing new relationships. So our organization is around our phone buddies. We have volunteer housed people connecting with unhoused community members. And it's done virtually, and have relationships that have lasted for over 5 years now, where they consider themselves to be friends and family with each other. And then the third part is around basic income. And so really using a cash plus model to create some additional space in people's lives to really enhance and build on those social relationships that can help them manage and navigate through homelessness into housing stability. And our organization has 2 components to it. One is around so that nobody experiences homelessness alone. And the other part is nobody feels helpless around the issue of homelessness. And so it really creates and mobilizing our housed community to be part of the solution and to be in relationship with their unhoused neighbors. And so we support people across the country and support a lot of people here in California too.
I wanted to just drill down on that because it was something that came up in the last panel as we've been thinking about what do we do about it? And the part of your work, one of many, but the part of your work I find so fascinating is you are building community with those who are not just family members. And I wonder, what does that outreach look like? How does someone who lives in San Francisco and maybe in an area that has witness or is witnessing significant homelessness. How is that invitation happen to them to participate?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm often, and I'm assuming you're talking about the housed community.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people reach out to us. I think one of the most, this year, the pandemic, different things over the past year, there's been a lot of challenges for communities across the country. We're getting ready for additional challenges. And there's been decisions that have been made at the state and federal level around homelessness and homeless services. And it's been very fascinating and very humbling to be in an organization where you have volunteer housed community members across the country asking to be in partnership and be in community with the unhoused neighbors. They're asking for a different solution. And so it's been, I mean, we have chapters over the past year. We've had 8 new chapters be implemented, and that's volunteers stepping up and doing outreach in their local community with the unhoused neighbors. And that's Fort Worth, like there's 3 in Texas right now, 1 in Vermont. So it's like also like who's asking for this solution has been very fascinating. So yes, I mean, like we do social media outreach, but I mean, a lot of it is people coming to us and asking for something different. So
I know we have 2 other panelists here. I just have to, but I just want to press this thing because I just think your work is so fascinating. What is the training or preparation for these housed individuals to engage with those? I think one of the things sometimes that we might come away with, or very logically, is to have a sense that I don't even know really how I would communicate with someone in that.
Yeah, so we provide training for individuals virtually. And then they have regular weekly conversations that are available for people to interact with each other, and we have online modules for people to participate with. I mean, and a lot of it is just getting on the phone. We will give some, start with these questions. You can ask a couple things to get things going, but a lot of it is really just about, what you find is that there's like more commonalities than you might expect. And the other piece is that we have, as people are both as a volunteer identifying who they are, where their interests are, what is important to them, we then also connect. We do the same thing with the unhoused community, and so we do a little bit of matchmaking behind the scene too. So it's not, it's not pure, if somebody's like, oh, I want to talk to somebody about a sports team, like a very specific sports team, I'm a Mets fan, so I want to talk about another Mets, fan, we will do that connection with each other. Or if I'm a veteran.
Tim Carney's available, by the way, if you are looking for that.
See, I think I did the Yankees then. So I think it's a lot of, just really trying to find some seeds and really connecting people. And so, and we provide people with some framing and some questions, and we're around with staff and other volunteers to be able to be a support network as they're engaging in these new relationships. So.
Very good. Councilman Falcone, both you and Dan, I was connected to through Alyssa Lee, who's at the governor's office, specifically in the area that has run a program that maybe some of our California residents here may not know of, called Neighbor to Neighbor. As an elected official, tell us a little bit about what that particular program has meant for the city of Riverside. And then just as an elected official, is this a topic that you hear discussed or is particularly concerning in Riverside?
Well, I think as one of maybe the only elected officials that has been on the panel today, I'm the government person. Hopefully no one will throw a shoe at me or something here, but because I agree that government is not the solution to all things. But in this particular case, with Neighbor to Neighbor, a state program really, yes, through the governor's office that looked at this issue, this topic of people being so disconnected, people not, a mixture of coming out of COVID, but also some of the trend that we have seen ongoing, of how we then reconnect people to each other, to their neighbors, hence the name, to their neighborhood, to their city. And again, so much of what people had said today, the value in that local connection. So in the case of Riverside, we were fortunate that our mayor of Riverside has great connections in Sacramento that was able to have Riverside be one of the first cities that was able to really be part of this trial run, if you will, of cities that had this Neighbor to Neighbor program that was looking at, in particular in Riverside's case, and one of our most underserved communities, really. This was funding. This was partnership with the state that was allowing this neighborhood to have everything. It was nonprofits came together, the city came together, have everything from they were doing senior outreach. We talked about in particular focus on the elderly in the previous panel. Everything from food pantries, community gardens, how do you get people connected with each other? And some of that maybe seems to many of us, especially after today's program, as somewhat common sense, but just wasn't happening for various reasons. And two other main topics with that is we have 28 distinct neighborhoods in Riverside. We're only 85 square miles, but 28 neighborhoods, and everyone takes great pride in their particular neighborhood. And so this was also an effort to, okay, you take great pride in that neighborhood, now organize, get a neighborhood group, come together and let's talk about the particular challenges or needs or whatever it may be in that neighborhood. And this helped with that as well. And so that, I think, overall, was one of the reasons why this has taken shape so well. But from an elected official perspective, I mean, I'm not fortunate enough to represent the neighborhood that really got this neighbor-to-neighbor program, but I spoke to my colleague who does represent it late last week and was saying how wonderful it's been and how Riverside is fortunate to be in this select group of cities across California that are benefiting from it. But so much of what he was telling me, though, are a lot of things that I've seen that have transcended, I think, in other neighborhoods, maybe despite that not being a focus of the neighbor-to-neighbor program. And that's looking at, again, how do you as a neighborhood come together and realize that you can affect change, that you can have a role in the way your city is shaped, the way policy is made and decided. And that, I think, has been one of the greatest takeaways from it.
You know, you raised this part about the different neighborhoods, and I think one of the themes that's come through these first two panels is a question of scale. At what scale should we be responding to this issue? And I think Riverside is just one of the classic California cities. I mean, it's iconic in some ways, just an incredible history. And to your point, and you certainly know more about the city than I do, but there really are some classic neighborhoods. To what degree is this affiliation with that you're looking to develop, or maybe the culture that you're sensing in Riverside, one that is very much Riverside focused versus this more neighborhood level engagement? Because I haven't heard a lot about, we were talking before about nationalism and at what scale are we thinking about developing these place-based affiliations. But to think about this, not just at the state or city level, but even at the neighborhood level, tell me a little bit about how the neighborhoods there see each other differently.
Well, I will say some of those quintessential California neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods, very, kind of Riverside, Pasadena, Santa Barbara have very similar histories and architecture. I'm fortunate I represent those areas, so I'm very proud of those. That there's great pride in that identity.
Yep.
So we say Riverside's the largest small town. It's the 12th largest city in California. There's 483 cities in California. We're number 12. So population-wise, fairly large, but still feels very small town. Everybody knows everybody, who you went to high school with, and so forth. And so there is great pride in that, of just this generational city, people that were born and raised here for forever and had their kids there. There's that, and then there's also great pride in the history. Yeah. And this is what I tell a lot of people. One thing that brings people together, whether it be national, state, local, and even as closely knit as the neighborhood, is a passion and a pride in one's history and where they come from and how that sets a chart for where you're going. And there's great pride in these particular neighborhoods, especially the historic neighborhoods, the historic architecture, the story of how they came to be. That really unites people. Well, and of the four neighborhoods I represent, all four of them are very passionate about their history, and that's what brings them together. Still have great identity in being a Riversider, but then that great identity in being in that particular neighborhood as well.
Riversider. I actually did not know that.
That's my license plate, actually. That's my license plate. Is that right? Yeah. You'll see it out there. Don't key that car, though.
Dan, you work for a special district, and for those that may not be familiar with California governance, we have cities, counties, and special districts with kind of their own revenue resources and kind of service specific offerings that they're making. You're with the City of Paradise, town.
No.
Oh.
We are independent.
Right.
Yes.
But you work in
Paradise.
Paradise.
That's part of our district.
And for some that may not be familiar with recent California history, your community has experienced a horrific fire. We obviously have some experience with that here in Malibu recently. And I wonder if you could talk through, I mean, obviously to go through what your community went through, all the focus is on first understanding the trauma that you've gone through, but then when policymakers and political leaders come together, there are now decisions being made about how we rebuild. But I wonder how you and your district began to understand that there was this other issue happening around loneliness as well. How was that understood given the trauma that your community went through?
Yeah, just a little context is, one thing that's, we're all, a lot of us in the room are Californians, and we look at Malibu, it's mountainous, it has limited access, no stranger to wildfire. We're in an area of the state, it's kind of the confluence, the connection between the Sierra Nevada and the Cascade Range. A lot of different topography, complex terrain, very low population density in comparison to our other areas, even pre-fire. But ironically, Paradise at one point, 64 million years ago, had a view of the ocean too. So we have two communities about the same size as Malibu. Very different socioeconomic, very different connections, very different infrastructure. Pre-campfire, we had a lot of, what would typically be kind of a rec and park district you might expect there. Swimming lessons, ball fields, see a lot of senior programs. We had a retirement community there. And yet we knew that we had a high incidence of adverse childhood experiences in our population. So adverse childhood experiences are those things that are death in the family. It's alcoholism. It is any number of negative impacts that not only have an impact on a young adult or child, but have impact on their health deep into adulthood. And it can be intergenerational. There may even be some epigenetic markers for it. So I think it's really interesting. From our standpoint, Butte County had pre-fire, was #1 in the state after all 58 counties to have that high level of ACEs scores. So we were starting to take an idea of how do we replace some of those adverse childhood experiences with beneficial ones. And so we're not a social agency, but we're trying to provide these positive experiences, leadership, get kids outdoors, limited time on the phone, let them have that social connection. So that was actually preceding the campfire, and I think it brought into really sharp focus after the campfire. This sounds ridiculous, but a rec and park district might do it. What do you do 1 week after the evacuation order is lifted is you open up an ice rink. Okay, sounds absurd. And yet that opening day, we had about 5,000 people that used to live in the zip code the month before, could not spend that night there, but they wanted to be connected. And so I think that really, sorry, I get a little choked up about it, really set in motion for us that community building, connectivity was important. We're not a department of loneliness on the federal level. And if we do a top-down approach, the top isn't very far from the bottom. So there's not much trickle down for us. When we received that neighbor-to-neighbor grant, we took a fundamentally different approach than some of our other more organizations that had capacity. So we were the only special district that got that award, that grant. From the start, what we intended to do is work with groups. So we wanted to be a good neighbor as an organization. How do we be a good neighbor? And so we created basically venture capital for events and connectivity. We built in some of that into existing events. We have some long-standing events. We're a 75-year-old organization. There's that Apple Festival and some other things that have been there a long time. We'd have simple things like a map, and people would wear a bracelet, and they'd see that color bracelet, and they'd start a conversation. We had personality bingo, in which you would have to fill out a card by asking questions and talking to people and getting fabulous prizes. But it's funny that that little competition would enable people to have those conversations with people that they may not connect with. And so we had a whole bunch of programs there that were tied in with our youth especially, getting them outdoors. But, sorry, I was just going to look at one. Oh, just I wanted to cite some of our numbers. About a year and a half into the program, we have 620 events. We've had over 11,000 people participate. And we've worked with over 35 organizations, some of them which we did not know existed before this program came into effect. So I think it's the idea of, I like to say it's venture capital because it's getting some of that funding down to the grassroots, nurturing it, and then there's nothing like a local catastrophe or your local Armageddon to see what kind of infrastructure you have left. So what we had left was a lot of people that cared about the community and a lot of nonprofits that were kind of filling in some gaps that weren't being covered by higher levels of government. So I think from our standpoint, it's been a really very positive experience. And some of the quotes, I would love to have a social studies follow up on this, on what happens with.
We have researchers in the room.
Come and visit
Might
me.
be possible.
But I think there's a lot, this is fertile ground to see what happens next with a practical approach to it.
Dan, just to look a little bit more deeply, you mentioned that in Paradise and in that region, there's been a trend line heading in this area, but obviously the fire had this catastrophic element to it. For those of us who are working in this region in responding to both the Franklin fire and the Paradise and Eaton or the Palisades and Eaton fires, is there anything that you would offer to policymakers to be thinking about on these issues related to loneliness that we should be thinking about?
I think for us, it's kind of, a lot of times, it's whatever tools you have available. For us as a park and rec district, we know that we're pretty good at putting on events and being creative and connecting people. I think a lot of entities that are larger scale, provide other services, that may be low on their totem pole. So I worked for a municipality before. Parks were always kind of low on the list as far as their priorities. Yet what happened after COVID, what happened after some of these other events, people are wanting to connect. They're out in these spaces. And I think that's really important to kind of have those things. Some of these events are absurd when you think about it. We had dive-in movies where we showed Jaws, Finding Nemo too. But you want to see some good connectivity, you play Jaws while you're in the pool. You have about 20 lifeguards there too. But the idea of having that connectivity by just having this simple event and then I think repeated contacts with people. So we've had some simple things, some walks. There's a group that came one day through one of our parks, about 20 people. And I asked them, just curiosity, what was it? And it was from a group that we had on this Neighbor to Neighbor that had run for about 3 months. They continued walking about 6 months afterward, and they were going to have lunch that day. So this is a social connectivity that I know that matters quite a bit because, from the campfire and other, LA fires down here, predominantly the rescues were neighbors protecting them, getting them self-rescue, or them protecting another neighbor. So you can have, we all have Watchfire on our phones now. We have social media. We have alerts that come up. And yet, if a person doesn't know that their neighbor next door doesn't put on his hearing aids until after he has his morning coffee, that's a life-threatening situation. So knowing a neighbor can save a life along with sort of that social connectivity. So I think that having those things that may seem a little bit soft are actually pretty important priorities. And I think we tend to lose track of that when we're looking at potholes and infrastructure and other things that might be out there. There's a social infrastructure that we need to invest in.
I love that, social infrastructure. That perfectly segues to my next question, which is drafting off of Professor McWilliam Barnes' comment in the first panel. We've had several conferences about this issue. And the first one that we did was back in 2012. And it's fair to say that most of the people attending were either Tocqueville devotees or had some weird interest in the subject matter. But here we are with an increasing amount of cross-disciplinary work that's happening. A Surgeon General at one point calling this out, as mentioned before, as an epidemic. We have some great books on the subject matter that are highlighting it. I wonder, as policymakers and service providers, how you would look back just over the last 10 years. Is this something that in your work that you're seeing this phrase or term? Like even though I helped to organize this conference, I'm open to the fact that this is a fad. Just people talking a lot about loneliness and this kind of a thing, and yeah, I'm lonely, so it's a thing. But as people who are directly engaged in this work, I wonder to what degree in your own circles you are seeing this term used and there's an awareness there that there really is a there. Councilman Levin.
Well, first, I was thinking about earlier, listening to some of the panels. In my mind, the opposite of loneliness is purpose. What really gets you out of bed each morning to want to go and make the world a better place or do things to help others, and the kind of the friends and folks you make along that way. And so I think that another thing that was said earlier too that I agree with is that this has just been amplified with the internet. This has just been amplified with the after COVID-19 or during
Right.
COVID-19. And so you're seeing now this greater spotlight and maybe this expediting of something that was already there. So I know for us at the city level, there is this idea that people feel now more disconnected than ever before, even from their local government. And again, I go back to that while the federal government, and in many cases Sacramento, gets so much attention that and also raises so much ire from citizens, that there's so much that can be happening at the local level that you don't have to feel disillusioned. You don't have to feel disconnected. You don't have to feel this particular type of way in your own neighborhood because that change can be affected. And it's not about someone being in a position of authority, or it's not about someone's socioeconomic status. It's possible to do, just people just need the tools and the know-how to do that. And that's what I think is so great about that neighbor-to-neighbor program is that it really sets people up for their own success in that particular way. And so I think that it's not a fad, but I do think that it's not just because of the advent of internet or social media, and has been going on for, the conference has been going on for longer than COVID, longer than this great rise in social media, that I think it shows that it's ongoing, but now maybe different things that highlight it and bring it forward.
Mary, your work, obviously with the unhoused, with homelessness, I mean, your organization was the first that I heard that really viewed these challenges as relational breakdown, as opposed to, not that I want to drag up any other things, but housing first or harm reduction. I'm not going to make any comment on those things. I'm happy to talk about those separately. But to focus on this, how unique is what you're doing within the community of homeless providers, whether it's in San Francisco or nationally, and what would you want the community of those who are serving those populations to know about your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting when you initially just asked the question of, like, is this a fad? So I've been in the nonprofit space for a long time, many years now, and I started initially by running a homeless program in Alameda County, Northern California. And at that time, it was very clear how much those social relationships were missing from people's lives around homelessness. And as I've been re-entering, and been in the public health space now for quite a while, and re-entering back into the homeless direct service provider space over the last couple of years as I came back to the Miracle Messages community, I think whenever I talk to nonprofits in the space, or a lot of the people in different public spaces and public officials, like, this is people know this. Like I'm not trying to convince people. I'm never in a position where I'm trying to convince a nonprofit organization that social relationships are a key component that is impacting people's lives who are experiencing homelessness. Like that has never once been my conversation. The challenge is there is not funding in place to help support them. It is considered like that soft component. It is not a key component it is not seen and measured and supported as being an important part of one's success into and out of homelessness, nor are we equating it to the lack of social relationships as potentially being a preventative step to people entering into homelessness. And so I think as we're moving forward, I think like we do need there to be at both the local level and at the state level and federal, like there needs to be some acknowledgement that homelessness, you do need to be looking at those social interconnectedness with people, and we need to be tracking that and supporting that and nurturing that. And so, and I think where we get to step into the space is because we are a volunteer organization for we are able to be an add-on, and so we are not ever taking from that local nonprofit space. We are like building into that already existing infrastructure, and so the doors are open wide for us. So.
Curious as to, I mean, in some ways what I hear you saying is that at least in both engaging philanthropically, but also in partnership with municipal and state governments, that this needs to be a greater budget priority.
I mean, even just talked about, honestly. Like, I mean, we work in Santa Cruz County, and they integrated loneliness questions into their continuum of care, which is like how they, the screening for people who are experiencing homelessness. And that now they're integrating and they're asking people questions and they're referring into our services, plus also like connecting into other services within the community. And that's where you got to start to see that is change, right? It's more of a systemic level change that we need to see more of that. So.
Do you see that as a trend line within homelessness services, or are you still
it's a seed.
A bit of a voice in the wilderness?
Yeah. I think people know it's like we're really planting seeds right now,
Okay.
and then being able to show the impact and data around it. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're videotaping this. We need to get the word out.
Yeah.
Dan, at the special district, especially in the Parks and Rec world, which is a world, in some ways, your focus from a service perspective is perfectly aligned with responding to these issues, right? You're connecting with different audiences. You're usually bringing people together. You're running parts of public infrastructure that are naturally gathering people together. How much has this term been something in either the CSD, California Special Districts Association, or other places that colleagues of yours see this as a role for specifically your kinds of programs?
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really interesting from us, we're a pioneer. Unfortunately, we had kind of hit the first wave of these catastrophic fires impact communities. And so there have been a lot of my colleagues from other organizations that reach out and will ask on how to run some of this programs and how do they respond to it. Footprint of the Camp Fire is essentially our district boundaries. So it's 172 square miles. Only a little bit of the Camp Fire was outside. Only a little bit of our district was untouched. So we are kind of a ground zero for this in a very real sense. And I think to some extent, because of the lack of kind of governmental infrastructure, a big role has happened to us as a rural district to help our rural customers. And so I think it's a little bit different. It's kind of like that, the absence has necessitated some responses that are unusual at first. But now we're starting to have more of our colleagues from other districts starting to ask questions about it. 3 years ago, we have a nature and forest therapy guide program. Was instigated by Chico State Enterprises that put a cohort, people that work in social sciences, working in districts like me, and then throughout our area, geographically based. They walk through this program that pulls on Japanese practices of getting people out into nature. So Sharon Roku is the practice. But the idea is there's a westernized version of it, Americanized version of it, that tries to get people connected in nature and it's been pretty remarkable. What surprised me is in our area, it's a rugged individualism area, that something like that might be viewed a little bit wooey or hippie or anything of those phrases. You know, we do have goat yoga, so we aren't barbarians out there. But the idea is that we have these practices that people may not know what they get from it in the moment, but over time when they come back. We actually ran that program with some of our colleagues at a tour that we provided with California Association of Parks and Recs districts. And then what was interesting to me is that they wanted us to do it at a conference the following year, and we've had some requests on how do they incorporate that into existing programs that they have. How do they get people out into nature and have these kind of invitational experiences that were, you know, very sensory, very oriented to kind of calming themselves down. But it's been interesting to see that response on it. Some of our programs with the districts, a lot of it came out of COVID, right? So we had a big weight that was pushed on the districts. We still had staff that were running. We didn't receive any of the COVID funds that went to municipalities and to counties. And yet a lot of special districts and recreational areas, that's where people were kind of self-medicating themselves with the nature out there.
Right.
And so I think there is kind of an upswing and awareness of it that is there that hasn't quite caught up to where it needs to be. It's kind of exciting to hear that some of these things have been talked about here for a decade or more, are starting to permeate throughout practitioners out there.
Councilman, I want to come back to you and thinking back on that, really what I thought was a poignant exchange with, in our first panel with Matt Crawford and Grace, talking about that sense of identity, but balanced with that ability to welcome others into your community. I thought it was really wonderful what you said about the importance of the identity of both Riverside and these neighborhoods. Question one was, how is that inculcated for people that are coming into the community, moving into the community in new ways, and have those identities changed over time?
It's a great question because it's something that I'm not born and raised in Riverside, but have great pride, so much pride that I paid the DMV extra to have that license plate, you know, that says Riverside. I have a tattoo for the city of Riverside. So, but I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, another very big history-centric city about great pride in being from that location. And so I am a transplant too. My family were all transplants to Riverside. And what I can never really put my exact finger on of understanding why is how you have a city with these respective neighborhoods that take great pride in being Riverside native, born and raised Riverside, the particular neighborhood within the city, great pride in that, but yet are very welcoming of people that come in and will then foster that same pride as well. And I don't know exactly what the root cause of that is, but I think it's, maybe this is a little naive, but it's almost the love for the city is so strong, the love for the pride of place is so strong that widening that circle of bringing in more people who will show and have that same sense of pride and passion, you know, that tide lifts all ships together is kind of where I think that it's at. And I do think that sense of community and passion for the identity of the neighborhood, the city, helps with combating the sense of loneliness. It's kind of been, I guess, the common thread to what, not only our conference, of course, but my comments here. There just seems to be a welcoming attitude to bringing in new people. But it comes with a caveat of, but you have to be as passionate as those who were born and raised there as well, you know?
Yeah. You know, I've joked about this on a few occasions, but before my family and I moved to campus here a few years ago, we lived in Santa Monica for about a dozen years, and I would often joke that I was one of 5 Republicans who lived in Santa Monica. But at the same time, that was a joke. That was a joke.
A hush fell over the crowd.
Right,
You know?
I know. Like, is it really?
Yeah, there's actually 6 there.
Yeah, now there's 4. So, but what I've felt in very short order in getting to know my neighbors. My wife's family has some, while we don't have a family member living there currently, there's, my in-laws met at Samo High. There's a lot of family connection there. But was very quickly a sense of identity, like people understood why they loved Santa Monica and why they didn't love Brentwood, which I was very much a part of that, you know.
And I think that that goes to the question of why do we feel connected to any place?
Yes.
Take Riverside out of the equation.
Yeah.
Why do we feel connected to any place that we live or any place that we enjoy spending time? What are those things? Is it history? Is it architecture? Is it the aesthetic? Is it the connection to nature? Whatever it may be, it's those things that I think unite a neighborhood or a community around a particular location because there's great passion for whatever that particular item is.
Yeah.
In Riverside's case, it's history and architecture,
Yeah.
but it changes based upon where you are.
Well, that kind of leads to a question for you, Mary. What I didn't know is that your organization is working in other places. And I just wonder, even though you've got kind of a methodology, how does that change at all? Have you sensed just either the receptivity or the kinds of people that you're working with? Does that differ from place to place?
I mean, I think like how we integrate and like and how we communicate with the different community nonprofits a little bit, but I mean, I feel like there's like this. I think our work is really going to get at the core of like wanting to care for one's neighbor, right? And so I think that that's like a pretty common language across the country. And again, like it's been humbling. It's like as I've been navigating this and getting to know different communities, both my misperceptions of what homelessness might look like across the country, I've learned a lot that I didn't necessarily know. And I think you know, just around, you know, what homelessness looks like in Burlington, Vermont versus what it looks like in, you know, Austin, Texas versus what it looks like in San Francisco. And but I think there's like, people are kind of, there's some consistent like wanting to be in community, wanting to, you know, integrate. Like I think it might depend on like some communities, let's say in Texas, like in Fort Worth, Texas, there might be a little bit more around like faith-based organizations that you're partnering with. That might look different than, you know, what we're doing in Orange County versus, you know, Vermont. So I think it's like there's like the nonprofits that we're partnering with might shift, but I think the community members are coming with very similar desires. The volunteers are, and so yeah.
Dan, given what Paradise went through, I'm curious to what degree do those who are back see the identity now of Paradise as a community that's gone through this? Like how much of a part is the campfire related to their current identity? And I wonder to what degree, it was fascinating what you said before, noting on what our experience may have been, and I think is true, but the importance of neighbors helping neighbors in the instance of a catastrophe like this. And I just wonder to what sense you've been able to perceive that there's actually, you know, we see after many of these tragedies, you know, Malibu strong, or, you know, there's a sense of identity that actually is built out of a great tragedy. And I wonder what you perceive there.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, I mean, I always seem to fail on my fire analogies, but trial by fire, quite literally, you know, is just something that is really strong in communities that have endured it. One thing that's interesting in Paradise right now, we're now looking at 2018 is a long ways away. There have been a number of tragedies that have happened. Our community now is, we lost originally about 95% of homes in Paradise, and about half as many in Magalia, a community up the hill. So a lot of folks right now, we're about 11,000 population. The schools are full right now in comparison to what they were. So you take half the population and you have more kids, there's a changing, shifting demographic that has happened. So at this point, about half the community of that 10 or 11,000 that are in Paradise itself are new. So they're new to the community, and yet they have this Paradise strong, this Paradise pride that seems to happen. And I think there is a danger in a lot of places where you can have, you want that sense of belonging, but you don't want to be exclusive and cut people out. So are you welcoming to new folks that are in the community? And I think that seems to be carrying on right now, that there is that very welcoming situation that's occurring. One thing that happens, I think, is just trying to get people caught up on the culture, being prepared for wildfire, having a go bag, those kind of things. That may not be, there's a perception, kind of like the big one people talk about on earthquakes. Oh, you've had your big one on fires. Like, nope, the clock is reset. We're probably on a 10-year cycle. So when these fires come through, it resets the ecological clock. You're actually less likely to have the catastrophic wildfire on the conditions we had if we could get in there early enough to take care of those conditions than the flashier fuels that we have now. So people have to be kind of aware of that. And so I think there is that sort of community part that neighbors need to help out each other on that. They need to help share some of that culture and sort of good practices.
So what you're saying is, for those that are new moving into the community, making sure that there's a connection between the community members who actually went through the fire to communicate, and that's an opportunity actually to build connections that way too.
I think so. And, something else I forgot to mention earlier is our definition of community was a little bit different. So I think a lot of, like Riverside has very distinct neighborhoods that have that moniker for years, decades. Paradise and environments around it that you may have a less affinity. You may know some of your neighbors, but if you're a new family of 5 rambunctious kids and you just moved into a neighborhood of 70 and 80-year-olds, probably not the most popular family there. But yet we have defined some communities that are kind of by interest. They like hiking, or there's a group called Moms on the Ridge that we've been doing some unique things of having a play date with the kids at a little playground at Paradise Lake. And mom and dad could go on a hike, leave the kids alone for a while with other parents. So there's a connectivity there that would be commonplace pre-COVID, that you don't have these kind of play dates. And so I think there's trying to establish some, some community tendrils that may have some new folks there that may not be party to what was it like before. They're creating something new.
I want to open up for questions here in just a second, but I just wanted to come back to this point because it may be the case that we are going to experience that kind of dynamic here in the region, with new people coming in and others leaving for whatever reason. Do you have a way of comparing the sense of identity in Paradise before to after the fire with a new population? Like, I'm very interested, as I was trying to discuss here with the councilman, about how these ideas of identity are transmitted. And I wonder, it sounds like it happens kind of neighbor to neighbor, or in the school system, or...
Actually, that's something I've given quite a bit of thought to. I think a lot of places, community is what people think they drive through on their way from work to their garage. And I think that it is very much part of the people and the interaction part. That's what makes a community strong. I think we're trying to build something that has authenticness to it. I think that's, hearing some of the conversations today, when we went through the whole gamut of things, it kind of reminds me of consumption of the old eras. Really tuberculosis, but until you knew it was tuberculosis, people would die of consumption. And I think we have imprecise language in what we're using right now. We're using political polarization, social isolation, technology, family estrangement. All of those things are part of something that seems something about our connectedness to each other, to nature, to our families. And so that seems to be what's missing now. I think we're going to have better language over the next few years, hopefully with your guys' help in here, on how do we define these problems? And then we'll look back and see some common threads on how to do it. I think from our standpoint, what we're trying to do is reinstill some of that community building. There's a notion that the people are coming to Paradise, that they're, to some extent, pioneers, right? They are back on the frontier. They're building something new. And as a district, we're doing things that right now with new parks and some of the programs that we have that are a logarithmic scale, exponential scale in the last 5 years in comparison to our first 75 years of existence. So there's some really fundamentally different things about the community, but I think it does point to connectivity and getting people out there.
Let's open up. We got about 10 minutes for questions. Yes, over here, Carolyn.
First, thanks so much to all of you for all the work you're doing. It's like incredibly inspiring, uplifting to hear. I love just to see communities come together. Mary, a question for you. One downside I see with bringing therapists in is they're not necessarily part of a natural community, that it's much more of a transactional relationship. And so your model is super interesting to me because you have proactive engagement from community members that want to get involved with other community members. Do you think about like longevity at all, or asking those participants, the housed participants, what their investment might look like?
Yeah, so we are this like informal network, right? Like the social network that we all kind of need. I think the example came up like with earlier today about like the food in your fridge, right? Your freezer, right? And so like there's like we're all going to have moments of crisis. And so how do we have these? Our social networks cannot be just formal providers, right? Formal providers, mental health clinicians are a really important part of it, like your physician is, but like they shouldn't be your best friend, right? Hopefully. And so I think but what's interesting about our model is because our model is volunteer. So we ask the volunteers can commit once a week for at least 3 months. But people stay with us for years. And I've mentioned like a lot of our friends like have been together for more than a year now. And so it's really relationship-based versus service delivery-based, right? And so I think that is a very unique model in the social service space because it's really like when that relationship is ready to transition for whatever reason, that can close, but it's not because like I can only work with you for 18 months because now you're stably housed, and so now I have to like pull out. Like this is like really, it's the length of it is deemed by like the length of the relationship that they want to be in community with each other. So. Yeah.
Oh, we got over here.
A lot of what I've read about related to homelessness has to do with addiction issues and also with psychological issues, psychosis and that sort of thing. So I wondered, I didn't hear anything about that, but is that part of what you address?
So, I mean, there are people who navigate through homelessness. Some people do experience mental health. They have mental health needs. They have physical health needs. They have employment issues. And then some people have substance use. It's really dependent on that individual wanting to share that information. These friendships are meeting each other where they're at. Like, you might have a cousin who has an addiction problem. You're not like, every time you're talking to them, you're not like, oh my gosh, tell me about how you're doing in your recovery right now. Like, you're there as a person, right? So we're not talking, like, so if that person wants to share that, then we can meet that person where they're at, but it's really about being in friendship with somebody. And so that's where we're coming in, and so, yeah.
Yeah.
To your point, Mr. Falcone, on the unique identifying characteristics of neighborhoods, I think that was very apt. But what of newer areas that perhaps have been caught up in like there's a certain trend towards interchangeability. So this can be through the tyranny of the spreadsheet and interchangeability of design, of construction, through, for lack of a better word, an ivory tower approach to homogeneous sociology and psychology applications to all neighborhoods in terms of social services. And then, of course, the cultural interchangeability that comes through social media, as has been noted here before. How do you think in neighborhoods that have been created or are being created in this kind of like environment of interchangeability, how do you foster organic community to form there?
I love that. And there was actually a couple of things on one of the earlier panels that had me thinking about. One is this idea of how we encourage people to move around a whole lot, so not to stay in one place. And the other idea of everything, whether it be because of costs to physically construct new neighborhoods, or just the way that our society is going of making everything so homogenous. You kind of have these two elements that I think either encourage people to move around a whole lot, or then we lack this uniqueness, this individuality to a particular area. And so there's a lot of that struggle that happens. I think that's where, though, something I hadn't spoken to earlier is where maybe it's well, you got to remove the piece of people moving around a whole lot, because if they're going to move around a whole lot, there's only so much you can do in terms of feeling connected. Because of the physical distance. But if it's for the piece where everything, whether it be everything from services to the actual aesthetic of a neighborhood is very homogenous, that's when I think it comes down to that we don't necessarily attach ourselves to feel connected to a physical space, but it's building that camaraderie with people. And that is where that neighbor-to-neighbor program of educating people of how do you come together as a neighborhood, know your power and your influence and your strength of bringing about change, of making your neighborhood what you want it to be, how you want it to look in the future, that togetherness comes from that, the connection to people, as opposed to a connection to a particular service or industry or a particular aesthetic.
We have time for one more question. Beck? Oh. Did you have one? Wayne? Yeah.
Thank you all so much for this conversation. I wanted to ask about the impact on policy on third spaces. The idea of coffee shops, the local pub, places that people gather, and a lot of times these are privately owned businesses, not places that are publicly owned or established by the city. And with expediency and just the fast pace of life, we see businesses changing their chairs to be less comfortable so they can get more customers in and out rather than comfy chairs. So concepts like this that actually impact community on a deeper level. So I'd love to hear your ideas or what incentives we can have to promote maybe individual private business owners to create these third spaces to gather communities.
Hostile architecture, hostile design is what some of that is, in different ways. So there's downtown Riverside area I represent, where our city hall is in. There's 13 coffee shops in a matter of just 10 blocks or so. It's kind of it might be a little much, but and some of these I call them City Hall 2.0, because so much is what the way we connect as a city leadership, city with a capital C, with a lot of residents. A lot of our meetings are held outside of the palace walls of City Hall and in these coffee shops, but also similarly, it's where you're seeing organic community and neighbors come together. And I think a lot of where the success lies in is the value of locally owned. We talked about this on an earlier panel of how when you have these local businesses and they see the value in being a community space, maybe if that means they buy a cup of coffee and they sit there for 3 hours or something, and maybe don't want them there that long because you could turn over your profit margin greater if there's a greater turnover of customers. But there is a value in being this kind of local watering hole type thing. And I think a lot of cities that maybe have that more connected down-home feel, that already exists. That really already exists a lot for us in Riverside. But for larger cities, perhaps, that maybe have this more commercialized perspective, it's a little more of a challenge. And a lot of these various areas, especially if they're in business, heavily commercial or business areas, they'll have business districts. And a lot of these business districts, these merchants, despite maybe being in a larger city that has a lot of corporate involvement, can still have almost a connection and a neighborhood connection among these local merchants. And they together build a lot of these spaces. So I don't know really what an exact maybe policy solution is to that, but I think that, again, that when residents and businesses support each other, that there's a greater incentive to have those spaces. I don't want to. I'm sure others that have that maybe can weigh in on that.
I could give one other example. It's kind of unusual for I think a lot of districts that we have. A nonprofit had, with some support from us, was able to rebuild a community center, and then they gifted it to us. So we have this beautiful facility for events, an amazing commercial kitchen. What we're trying to do is kind of create some more third space uses there. So it's not just an event space, it's not necessarily just for classes, but we're running a senior program right now, for example, that we have bought some games, we bought a ping pong table, we bought a little bit of cafe seating for a little outside area, we run coffee. So pretty inexpensive, but we're starting to get more and more people to go there. Our big investment was a jigsaw puzzle table. So, there are some things that are very simple that we're trying to create that third space. Another thing that we're trying to do, and we just got this a couple of months ago, But I would like to have that kind of public-private partnership where we can have either food trucks or a vendor that's coming in providing a meal that's either low cost or free to the public, but kind of have some continual events that's not necessarily directed from us, but we're providing a venue for some commercial activity that they can then have people come to their store front and enjoy a meal. So just, I think we're kind of looking at some creative partnerships like that.
There's a lot, I'm sorry, Pete, there's a lot in city planning that can be done too. When we look at, because again, I don't think that in every case, the government's not the solution to all of this, but how can the government remove some barriers to let then the neighbors, to let the businesses succeed? And a lot of what we're doing in downtown Riverside is taking these maybe not as busy roads or alleyways or even along our main street, and one night a week or one of the Saturday, for example, a week, where you close that down and you make it where you have the food truck alley, or you have, of course, the farmer's market, or you have, these are not, I know, earth-shattering things, but it, number one, focuses less on vehicle transportation, which we spoke about earlier, and also is a different and new space, even if it is once a week and there's some regularity to it, where it makes it exciting for neighbors to come together and they can walk from their neighborhood, and that's making a third space out of a place that normally would be a roadway or an alleyway or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I want to kind of connects to this, but kind of a little bit like on a side tangent. But I think it's just having clarity around what the goals are for the local government, right? And I think that what really resonated when you mentioned ACEs is the common language and common definition of what that means, and that it was incorporated into departments that maybe wouldn't have necessarily been connected to ACEs. And so I just think like we were talking about local businesses, why are we truly building this? And having some common language, and that the how you do it by creating all the incredible ideas that you just gave, but it's really driving towards this goal of increasing social connections and maybe have to get the definition right and the language right around it. But I think that will help us to, across departments and across community members, really come together around that. So
I think that's a great way to finish this panel. Let's have a hand for our panel.